Well, hello everyone. A little bit late, but better late than never. I'm Zotomo, and we are here with our second season of Formula G and the Formula G show. And for at least a little while, I'm joined by the organizer himself, Ben. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, thank you. Yeah, happy to be here. Excited to talk about Formula G. So yeah, let's see how this goes.
Yeah, definitely. Calamity is on a bit of a dental leave, so we have the organizer himself filling in. So that'll be a good twist to some insights into how this organization is run and how the players are doing, because he's paying very close attention to it as well. Yeah, so our week 2 here in France, we started off with, let's take a look at those feature race locations. We've got our first location was outside of Geneva, right near that Switzerland border, Ben.
Yeah, so the location itself was probably semi-rural. It was on sort of a winding road in that weird bit of France between sort of, which is almost surrounded by Switzerland. Um, so yeah, the way I sort of was expecting people to do this location was, I always travel downhill whenever we're on a hill. So when I was sort of looking at the locations, that's what I did. And yeah, there was a sign at sort of the bottom of the road pointing towards Geneva and also the town of Evian, which here in England is a bottled water company. So I recognised that name. And obviously Geneva is the capital of Switzerland, maybe? Is it the capital? I don't know.
No.
But it's a major city in Switzerland,
Yes.
which most people will have heard of. So yeah, we knew it was going to be in sort of that bit of France. And yeah, as always in France, there is sort of quite a few road names or road numbers. So we had like the D1005 and I think it was the D1 as well, which we started on. So yeah, it was just a case of finding the actual roads, finding the intersection, which this sign was at, and then tracing it back to the start point. But yeah, definitely a nice location to start with, probably enough information to find the starting point.
Indeed. Yeah, the signs weren't too hard to pick up, as of course you said, it kind of went downhill into the town area, or the little village at least. And then, yeah, pretty major numbers and cities, so you were able to find those quite easily. The bit of a tricky part was kind of counting the little windy road up on the hill that you were in, which exact kind of bend were you at or something. So that was a little bit tricky, but most people managed to get an ace in that one at least. Round 2 was pretty straightforward in a major city, and by the architecture, very obviously Brittany.
Yeah, so another thing which sort of pointed towards Brittany quite clearly was the different language. So I noticed on all the road signs it said like Kreis something something, which I'm guessing is street in Breton. And also like at the entrance to the town it said like the French name then something in a different language underneath. And yeah, the architecture sort of always makes me think of sort of that region of France. And we're not in Brittany. Yeah, I find it quite similar to a lot of the architecture we get in England. So when I saw the architecture, I immediately thought, well, it's going to be not far from Brittany or that area of France. And yeah, sort of the like different languages all just sort of fed in towards it being in Brittany. I think something which I did see people struggle a bit with was actually finding the town itself. So I'm not too sure how you went about finding the actual town Zotomo, whether there was sort of any street signs, road signs which you saw.
Yeah, I got a couple crossroads as I wandered around town, and then also, of course, when you've got signs pointing to other cities, you kind of just do a lot of, kind of triangulation by that, and then you just zoom in further and further until you manage to figure it out and find it. I think I don't remember how I actually did this one. I was a little bit off, I believe, but I was in the general area. Did I find the town or not? I don't remember. I did. I got an ace, so apparently I did find it in this one. But yeah, again, just working your way backwards from those roads and towns, and knowing you were in Brittany really narrows down the search area to start with. In 5 minutes is plenty of time to find things.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. Once you realise you were in Brittany, which I imagine a lot of racers did fairly quickly, it's never going to be too difficult to sort of triangulate the location.
Then for round 3, we headed down to the border near Italy, very, very near Italy. With 5 minutes, you might have been able to hit the Italian border if you headed north, but that might have been a stretch. I don't think most people went that direction. But yeah, on a small side road off of a pretty major road in that area for that one.
Yeah, so same as round 1, really. If you head sort of downhill, down in towards the valley, you did eventually hit some signs. I think one sign was pointing towards Menton, and the other was Queno. Queno obviously being in Italy, Menton being on the French Riviera, right on the coast near to Italy. And again, it's a case of actually just finding the starting location on the map, because there's so many sort of small winding roads in this region of France that pinpointing can be a bit tough. But then again, there are like hairpins in the road, quite distinctive corners and things which might help. And another thing which sort of may have helped with the general region in this round is sort of the trees. Coming down the road was quite a few trees which felt Mediterranean, looked Mediterranean definitely. And so if you weren't too sure which region of France, then again, this would have probably helped you to narrow it down to the general region of the south of France. And again, the mountains would have helped with that as well.
Yeah, pretty much. Just I found the major road, the D6204, but I could not for the life of me find the little side road for I don't know why, and then just ran out of time. So I was like a road or two farther south than I should have been, which was my biggest drop of points in this round for sure.
Yeah, I think something worth mentioning here is when we had France last year in Formula G, we used, I think it was Mapper's map, which included the island of Réunion. We're using this map, which was, I think it's made by the French community, which doesn't include Réunion. Obviously, the distance in which you can score 25,000 points is going to be a lot shorter, because the map and the locations of the map are obviously a lot less widespread. So you probably had a bit more leeway last year to play within scoring 5,000 points than you would have done this year. So you just had to be a bit more accurate finding the location.
Yep, certainly indeed. Round 4 saw us right at a toll booth on a major highway, kind of quite a ways south of Paris. But I think there was a sign even pointing to Paris for that one.
Yeah, so just north on the highway was a sign to a few major towns. I think it was pointing towards Paris, Orléans, and Montégris. I apologise for my French pronunciation there. And it also said that we're on the A77, which once you know where Paris is, which obviously most people are going to do, you can sort of start looking roughly 200k south of Paris. And I think there was another sign a bit further down the road to Auxerre. It definitely said the junction coming up was junction number 21. So if you're looking in sort of that general region of France, 200 kilometers south of Paris, then you can just find the junction number on the highway and sort of trace it back, follow the road back towards the toll booth and the car park on the side of the road.
Yeah, the nice thing about this location was the toll booth actually shows up on the map as a gray bar across the road. So that was really helpful for pinpointing. I was just a little bit off. I would almost say enough within Google margin of error where if it would have been a little bit generous to me, I might have gotten an ace in that one. But just further away, I guess. I thought we were closer to like the car park exit or on-ramp, whatever, and we weren't. We were more in between the two. And I was like, well, it didn't really feel like it looked like that to me, but you know, whatever. That's the map, I guess. So
yeah, it's always going to be a bit tough pinpointing on highways when sort of roads are so wide and the distances can be a bit misleading on the map. You think you're right close to something and it's actually a bit further down the road. But We live
That's
and we learn, and we move on to the next round.
exactly. Next round was in Lille, right near the Belgium border. So another major city that was this. I think I saw the city name like 4 times within the first like maybe 40 seconds of the round. So definitely pretty obvious where you were. And then lots of numbers, and you just kind of work your way down from there.
Yeah, like you say, the town name was quite prominent all over. You could see it on quite a lot of buildings, and I think I saw it on a van or a bus, maybe. And also sort of the red brick architecture, or even just the regular brick architecture. I personally tend to associate a lot with that region of France,
Hmm.
especially up in the northeast towards Belgium. It just sort of gives me a bit more Germanic Belgian vibes than architecture you see in the rest of France. I don't know whether that's an actual theory which the Geoguessr community approve of, but that's definitely something which I personally tend to rely on when I see red bricks in France.
Very nice. Well, let's take a look exactly at how all the drivers did in this feature race. And to be expected, Tom Paula, the Frenchman, at the top of the charts for him. There, Orpheus, his partner in crime, another Frenchman, also getting a perfect score. We had actually 4 perfect scores, separated only by distance in this one. Boxa and Mr. Blue also picking up perfect scores. Fifth and sixth, the Norwegian pair, Moise Flubber and Ein Ardley, both new to this season. Silas Nick, Xander, Simi, Karp, Wakelock, rounding out that top 10 or 11 or so. You can see that Ord Baca, down in 19th, still had over 24,000 points. So even the people you see down in the second column there, down towards the middle teens, their scores are very, very good. Just this is a very super competitive map, Ben.
Yeah, like you say, very close, very competitive. I think with France, a lot of people will have had experience with France before. It is quite a common country in Geoguessr, which we might not necessarily see next week when we start looking at next week's map, or even other maps within the season. But yeah, especially for the European people who I think were, the top 7 competitors this week were all from Europe. So yeah, France will be a country which they probably know the geography of quite well, especially Tall Impala and Mr. Blue. Sorry, Tall Impala and Orpheus.
Oh, I'm sure Mr. Blue isn't too far away either. So,
Yeah.
ah,
So yeah, it will be quite a well-known country for a lot of these races, I would imagine, which obviously will increase the competitiveness.
yeah. It's a bit disappointing weeks for Jack ESM, the Baseman, Max FI, and Orbaka. Very good scores overall, as I mentioned, but still way down the table. They'll be looking to bounce back for this, as well as the Bamberg pair towards the bottom there. Unfortunate for Slovak, did not put up a score on this one. So he'll miss out on any chance of points for this week. Okay, well, let's switch over to the sprint race and the locations we had there. We were in Paris for this one. And the nice thing about Paris, Ben, as we'll kind of go through this a little bit faster, is that almost all the street signs have the district number on them when you're actually in Paris proper, which was our map. So that definitely helped the competitors on all the rounds. Outside of that, our first round, very famous location just off of the Arc de Triomphe.
Yeah, so this first location, obviously, I would expect most racers to know the location of. Obviously, the Arc de Triomphe is one of the major landmarks within Paris. Maybe the tricky thing would be sort of finding out which road off the Arc de Triomphe we were on, because I think there's something like 12 different roads which all come off the Arc de Triomphe. And especially if you had sort of one of the shorter time limits, you might feel a bit more rushed in finding out which exact road you were on. And even if you're sort of one road to the side, you would lose points quite quickly due to the points distribution which we have in the sprint race. But yeah, apart from that, you would expect most people to recognize the Arc de Triomphe and know sort of roughly where it is within Paris.
Very nice. Not much more to say about that. Yeah, Paris is famous for its wheel and spoke kind of road design, and several of its major intersections are built around that that kind of roundabout with all these roads leading off of it, and then it becoming a mess outside of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very interesting city layout. Paris has. Round two saw us in another major intersection with a line in the center. It's also sort of a famous landmark on the Google Maps. It has the point of interest of Les Catacombes de Paris, maybe an entrance into the famous catacombs that you might be able to visit here for that one. But again, a sort of well known thing, not as much as the Arc de Triomphe, of course, but did help with in pinpointing that one.
Yeah, and it was another case of having this sort of semi-large roundabout with, I think, was maybe 6 different roads coming off this time. A bit easier this time because we were actually on the roundabout rather than on one of the side roads coming off. So I think if you sort of clicked right on the middle section of the roundabout, you would probably get 25,000 points, or just to the side where we were. And there's also quite a few different road signs at the various exits to the roundabout, sort of pointing towards different districts of Paris, different landmarks. So again, even if you weren't too sure where this lion was within Paris, using the road signs, the street signs, and I think the road names would have said like second district on, you should have been able to find it quite easily, especially with the longer time limits, because obviously you can travel further and find more information with those longer times. But yeah, I quite like this location. It was something a bit different. You know, it's not every day you see a lion in the middle of the road, is it? So
Definitely not. Yeah, I was just a bit of a dunce on this round, kind of figured out sort of where we were, but then didn't have my orientation correct, and then time ran out, and yeah, that was a bit of a mess. But you know, still got a decent amount of points, I would say. But of course, how tough this competition is, it was enough to bump me down quite a bit on the rankings for that one already. Round three was on a really interesting dead end side road off the Champs Elysees, and near some pretty famous locations, the Grand Palace, I believe.
yeah, so not your typical Paris location really this time. We've not got sort of luxurious large buildings. It is hidden away a bit. I think we're right by a car park as well. But once you manage to get out of the side roads, like I said, we're right near the Champs Elysees, and the Grand Palace is just down the road as well. So these are all sort of well-known landmarks within Paris. And once you sort of know where these are, once you've found the Champs Elysees and the Grand Palace on the map, and even we weren't too far from the river, I don't think. So once you've sort of found the general location of where the river and the Grand Palace and the Champs Elysees are all close to, it's really just a case of following your route back towards the starting location and finding the road on the map. I think you did have to zoom in further than you would usually to find the road because it was just a really small side street. So that may have tripped up a couple of people. But once you knew where we were, it wouldn't have been too difficult to find the final location. And
Yeah,
like you said, with it being a dead end, pinpointing is never going to be too difficult.
yes, exactly. Dead ends are quite nice for that one. Round four saw us in the Bastille area of Paris. Quite lovely architecture. This is kind of what you would think of when you think of Paris in terms of these buildings and little streets everywhere. But again, the number on the road signs and pretty major roads made it pretty easy to find.
Yeah, same as the other rounds really. Once you've found a street sign, which we started right next to, it said we were in the 11th district. And yeah, it seemed a fairly large intersection, which we were on with quite a few points of interest as well. Different restaurants, cafes, bars, shops. So yeah, once you've found sort of the area, it wouldn't be too difficult to find the exact road and exact junction that we started on.
And to wrap things up, the fifth location, I should mention that the order that I'm giving them in are the ones that I played, the order I played. Other drivers had the same 5 locations, but they might not have been in this exact same order. So my last location was on a little island in the river. What is the river that runs through Paris?
It's the Seine, I believe.
Seine? Is that how you say it?
Seine? I'm not sure how you say it.
I'm sure, yeah,
Scine. Yeah.
I'm sure our
Someone.
French drivers will correct us in the comments below for this one. But yeah, again, a little bit weird, but again, having the bridges as well as the major river through Paris was definitely something to help you out. Worth checking all those little islands, and yeah, the I think the street names were also pretty easy to get as well. But yeah,
Yeah, so this was probably my favourite location of the sprint race. Just something about the architecture, it didn't feel typical Paris. It felt almost Maltese or maybe Tunisian, sort
mm,
of with like this the sandy coloured bricks being used in the buildings. But obviously, once you've turned round and you've realised that we're almost on the river by a bridge, it is just a case of looking at all the different islands within Paris and finding one with the right road names. But yeah, I just really enjoyed the architecture and the how different this round felt to what you would expect for Paris.
yeah, it was very nice indeed. Well, let's take a look at how our drivers did with these locations. And I would say we almost gave them too much time. At least you gave them too much time. We had
Yep.
9 players with 25 Ks. On this one's distance coming down to separate them, only 2 meters separating the top 4 places. Then a bit of a fallout after that. But again, top 14 or so, all within 24,500 or more. And then the drop off after that gets quite steep. Obviously, I think most of these drivers had 1 or 2 pretty bad rounds. A couple of them also having very little time, which might have caused a bit of an issue with some of them to there. But yeah, Einarglu, Boxa, Wakelock, Calamity, and Max FI running out those top 5 places. The 2 Frenchmen doing perfect scores, but not quite pinpointing well enough. Seeing them take 6th and 9th, respectively, for that one. But yeah, how exactly do you pick the times for the sprint race in terms of what's the fastest time and the slowest time?
So the times. So I'll talk you through the process for choosing the sprint race locations. So if it's a city which I know well or I've been to, I'll choose some locations which I remember from the city, have a walk around on Google Maps, see if there's anything else, any other locations which I like. If it's a city which I'm not too familiar with, I'll look at the other maps already on Geoguessr of the city, play a couple of those to get a feel for the different locations, different regions, different areas of the city. And then if there's locations which I found interesting or I really liked, I'd look at that location on Google Maps, walk around that location virtually, and see if there's any other similar locations to it around the area which sort of pique my interest. And then I'll sort of bring all the locations together and put them into a map. Obviously, only choosing 5 locations for the sprint race is quite difficult because in a lot of cities there's so many different locations, different interesting things which could be put into a map. So it is often quite hard to narrow it down to 5 locations. And then once I've made the map, I'll sort of think, well, how long would I expect the average player to need to get 5,000 points on this map? And then I'd sort of set that level. This is all just sort of my mental maths, mental arithmetic, mental thinking. I've not got like an algorithm or anything to help me with it. So I'll sort of set what I would expect the average time to be for like the middle row. And then 10 seconds either way. So obviously if the time reduces by 10 seconds each row of the grid. So yeah, it's really just sort of my own thinking, how long I would expect it to take someone to 25k a map, and then working from there.
Very nice indeed. Yeah, so with that, yeah, let's take a look at the overall standings for our drivers after 2 races here. Boxa takes the lead with 74 points. Moisfleber and Arglu, the Norwegian pair, coming in after him. The 2 French pair, Talampala and Orpheus, both of Scantrum, get a big boost with the French round, putting them in 4th and 5th, respectively. Other than that, right at the bottom, I still have no points. Slavak Goldie on 0 as well, and Shumi, all of us still searching for our first points. Simi picking up a few points here or there on 2 points this week. He actually failed to play week 1, So he actually managed to get a few points here. Danny Blonde also running out that bottom 5 as well. It's very early, Ben, but after 2 weeks, anything worth pointing out, you think, in this one?
Yeah, so something which I found quite interesting and did get discussed on Reddit a bit was how the new players seem to be performing stronger compared to the racers who competed last season. Whatever the reason for this is, I'm not too sure. But yeah, you look at the top 3, we've got Boxer, Moist Clubber and Einarglu, all new players for this season. So to see them performing strongly is interesting. Obviously, they are very competitive Geoguessr players. I think they all competed in Reddit League last season. So they clearly know how to play the game well. But yeah, that's just something I found a bit interesting. And also, we've only got 3 races on 0 points. And I think it took until about race 8 or 9 for everyone to get their first points last season. And I would definitely expect this to happen a lot quicker this season already, because there is only 3 people still to score points. So yeah, I would expect everyone to be getting. I would expect everyone to be scoring their first points within sort of weeks 4 or 5 at least. So yeah, good luck to Shumi, Slovak Goalie, and yourself, Zotomo. And yeah.
Yeah, what's really interesting is that we have 4 more drivers than we did last season, right? We have 12 teams instead of only 10. And yet, with that increase, more people aren't getting points, right? Still only the top 10 are getting points. So that means 4 more people are not getting points every week from both the sprint and the feature race. But despite that, as you mentioned, people are still picking up even a few points here or there, whether that be the sprint race or the feature race. So it's really been an interesting first 2 weeks in that sense. I've kind of been unlucky. I think this week I was in with my finishes. My sprint race was horrible, but I had a very good score, but I was 18th out of 24. So like, I'm not putting up bad scores, but it's just so competitive that even to be in the top 10, you have to pretty much lose like less than 300 points in the feature race. So a lot of us towards the bottom are looking for that sprint race advantage where we can have a little bit extra time that gets us the pinpointing. But unfortunately for me, the cities have been quite rough. So I'm waiting for Japan. Maybe that'll be my chance to pick up some points, but we'll see how things go from there. So let's shift over to the Constructor Challenge and the standings for these people after 2 weeks. And Nordhagen and Chariot stay on top, though switching places, rounding out the top 5, Scantrum, FGT, and Cape Motorsport. Every team has points, which is always nice to see. At the bottom, Bamberg and Opava. Oberhausen, probably the shock in the sense that 2 very good drivers and our winner from last season are way at the bottom this time.
Yeah, very interesting to see Oberhausen a bit further down the standings than we would expect. Obviously, there's still a lot of time to go. Still 8 races after France in which they can turn their season around. And although it looks like Nordhagen and Chariot are quite far ahead, with 84 points compared to maybe 8 for Bamberg or 10 for Opava, there's a lot of points on offer each week, and the swings can happen very easily. So I think for even just one race, there's a maximum of 52 points per week. So all it takes is maybe one strong week for Opava and a weaker week for Nordhagen. And yeah, the competition is all of a sudden on its head and looking a lot closer than it is now. So even if it does appear to be quite a large points difference, it could change very quickly.
Yeah, indeed. So as you mentioned, also we're only into week 2, so 84 points in 2 weeks is very good, but it still means that there's enough that other teams can earn that many points in a week or 2 as well. So you can see there's a 60-point swing somewhere here or there that even some of the lower teams have a chance to boost themselves way up. A bit early to call anything, so we'll just see how things kind of go from here. Our third map is gotta be, Ben, one of probably the most interesting maps to be in Formula G so far. It's South Korea. by Mapper. Average score of only 12,684. It's been played a lot, 19,000 times with over 1,000 locations, 579 likes with our sprint race in Seoul. Yeah, any interesting challenges that Korea is going to throw at our drivers here next week?
Yes, so Korea is going to be an interesting location, maybe the most interesting map we've got this season. The big thing, the elephant in the room, let's say, is the mapping provider in South Korea. It's obviously not Google Maps, as we all know. So that might make finding roads, finding towns, finding cities a bit harder, because you do have to zoom in a bit more to find the town names or the road numbers. But it's still a level playing field for everyone. And I think South Korea is a country which a lot of people don't have as much experience with compared to, say, France. So I would expect the spread of scores to be a bit wider. And it's also worth noting that South Korea doesn't have complete coverage. A lot of the coverage on Street View is sort of centered around cities and not too far from cities. So as long as it's near a city that you recognize or you are able to find the city quite easily, it shouldn't be too difficult to find where you are. And also, even though South Korea predominantly use a different script to what we use in Europe or America, there is still quite a bit of Latin script around, which should make it a bit easier compared to somewhere else which would have purely a different script.
Yeah, the one tricky thing about South Korea is that you can often get stuck in the middle of nowhere with small village names everywhere around, and that doesn't really help you a whole lot because you don't know where those towns are. So it's always a worry for us. But Mapper makes pretty good maps. So we'll see how that things turn out. I've already played mine, and if I can give any hints, it is don't look at the Google map. Like, look up a map, an actual like South Korean map from a different website that it's better labeled, because that's what I did, and I could like see how the roads were laid out better because you can see all the numbers when you're zoomed out. And that kind of thing. And that helped me get an idea of how the numbering system worked. And I also checked out the area codes for a lot of stuff, because that can be a big lifesaver in countries where you can't read everything, to at least give you an area to hunt in for some of those small numbers. So that would be my advice to a lot of drivers. That seemed to help me well in my feature race, if I give a little bit away there. But yeah, definitely do some research outside of Google Maps, because the Google Maps version of South Korea is really, really weird. So I looked up other maps, and it was definitely helpful in just getting an understanding of how the country works and everything. So,
yeah.
Well, thank you all for joining us for this little week look back at week 2 in France. We hope you all have a great time in South Korea, even if you're not playing in the competition. Check out the links on the Geo Challenges Reddit and play along to see how you would have done, and get some good practice in a variety of countries. And we'll see you all next time in Korea. Take care.